Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Angry albino alien dragon hunted him. Until the shocking moment it kneeled. The stars above Braxton 3 flickered in uneasy silence, their distant glow barely cutting through the thick, polluted haze that hung over the abandoned mining colony. The place had been dead for years, a graveyard of forgotten machines and rusted-out structures, but for Jonas Reed it was home, or at least the last place in the galaxy that would have him. Jonas sat at the edge of an old landing platform, the cracked metal beneath him groaning softly under his weight. He exhaled, watching his breath curl into the cold night air, his fingers tightening around the half-buried data chip he had pulled from his cal earlier that evening. The message had been clear, too clear: the hunt has begun. Prepare to be purged from the stars, he had heard. Whispers, of course, that the Galactic Council wanted him gone, that a human, a mere soldier, a veteran with no rank or claim, had no place in their carefully controlled order. He had assumed it was political, bureaucratic nonsense, something that would blow over. But this was different. This wasn't just exile, they had sent something after him. Jonas let out a slow breath, his mind already shifting to the familiar rhythm of survival. He had spent too many years on the battlefield to ignore the weight of an impending threat. He wasn't sure what was coming, but he knew it was already on its way, and this time there would be no running. The first sign of its arrival was the shift in the air. Jonas had felt it long before he saw it, an unnatural stillness, a vacuum of sound that pressed against his eardrums. The usual background hum of the settlement, the distant whir of wind turbines, the occasional rattle of loose metal, had vanished. Then the sky tore open. A massive shadow descended from the upper atmosphere, moving faster than anything that size had any right to move. The stars disappeared behind its vast, pale form, and Jonas felt his stomach tighten as he recognized the unmistakable curve of wings: a dragon. His throat went dry. He had heard stories and seen grainy HD images of the beasts that served the Council, living war machines engineered for destruction, but this one was different. It was white, its scales were almost luminescent in the darkness, its body sleek and impossibly powerful, moving with the eerie grace of something both ancient and artificial. And it was coming for him. Jonas barely had time to react before the beast landed with a force that shook the entire platform. The impact sent a wave of dust and debris exploding outward, metal groaning under the strain. He stumbled back, coughing against the sudden gust of displaced air, his instincts screaming at him to move, to fight, to run. But then the dragon lowered its head. Jonas froze. It was bowing. The great beast, the Council's deadliest weapon, the thing that had been sent to chase him from the galaxy, had just submitted to him. Jonas's breath came shallow, his fingers twitching toward the knife at his belt, his mind desperately trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Then the dragon spoke. Its voice was not human, not entirely, deep and resonant, like an echo traveling through time itself. Jonas Reed, it said, the sound of his name spoken by something that shouldn't even know how to say it sending a cold shiver down his spine. I am not here to kill you. Jonas swallowed hard. Then what the hell are you here for? The dragon lifted its gaze, eyes swirling with something ancient, something unreadable. To serve. Jonas had fought in a dozen wars, faced enemies that would make lesser men break. He had survived when he shouldn't have, made it out of situations that had claimed men better than him. But at that moment, standing before the bowing form of the most feared predator in the galaxy for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. The silence between them stretched thick with tension and unanswered questions. Jonas's grip on his knife remained firm, his muscles coiled, even as the massive beast before him remained motionless. The albino dragon, the same creature that had been sent to erase him from existence, had not attacked, had not roared, had not turned the sky to fire. Instead, it had bowed. Jonas had survived too long and fought too many battles to believe in mercy. The Council didn't make mistakes. If they had sent this thing, it was meant to kill him, no speeches, no second chances. And yet here it was, its massive silver blue eyes locked onto his with something eerily close to reverence. It didn't make sense. Jonas exhaled through his nose, forcing his pulse to slow. You were sent here to hunt me, he said at last, his voice measured. I got the warning. The dragon's gaze didn't waver. I was sent to eliminate a threat, it said, its voice carrying through the still air, ancient and steady, as though the weight of 1,000 years rested within it. But when I saw you, I could not. Jonas narrowed his eyes. Why? He asked. The dragon hesitated, its great wings twitched at its sides, its long tail curling slightly, the only sign of unease in its otherwise impenetrable demeanor. You are not what they told me you were. Jonas let out a sharp, humorless laugh. And what exactly did they tell you? The dragon's head lifted slightly, its pale scales gleaming under the twin moons. They called you an anomaly, a soldier who refused to die, a man who defied orders, who did not know his place. It paused, studying him. They fear you. Jonas's jaw tightened. He had spent years in the Galactic wars, fighting battles that weren't his, taking orders from men who saw him as disposable when he was no longer useful. They had discarded him, and when he refused to die quietly on some forgotten moon, they sent a dragon to finish the job. He had never considered himself dangerous, he had just been a man who wouldn't break. And apparently, that was enough to terrify them. Jonas shifted his stance. That still doesn't explain why you're not doing your job, he said. The dragon was quiet for a long moment, then, in a voice softer than before, it said, because I have no master. Jonas frowned. The dragon exhaled, and for the first time there was something almost pained in its voice. I have followed command since the day I was born. I have tilled, I have burned, I have hunted in the name of those who forged me. Its silver-blue eyes darkened, something unreadable flickering in their depths. But when I saw you, I felt nothing, no order, no will, no command pressing against my mind. Jonas realized what it was saying. This dragon, this living weapon, had been freed somehow, someway. Something had broken the Council's control over it, and instead of continuing its mission, instead of fulfilling the purpose it had been bred for, it had done the one thing its masters never expected it to do, it had chosen. Jonas, he ran a hand through his hair, letting out a breath, so what now? The dragon's tail flicked slightly. That is for you to decide. Jonas froze, all the answers he had expected were not among them. The wind shifted, carrying the distant hum of the colony's failing energy grid, the occasional crackle of static from forgotten speakers in the abandoned streets below. The moons cast long shadows across the broken structures, but Jonas barely noticed any of it. His focus was locked on the impossible creature before him. The Council's deadliest hunter was asking him for direction. Jonas exhaled sharply. Look, he said, rubbing a hand over his face, I don't know what kind of mess you just pulled me into, but I'm not looking for, he gestured vaguely at the dragon's towering form. Whatever the hell this is. The dragon didn't react, it simply watched, unblinking, its patience unnerving. Jonas let out a slow breath. You could have picked anyone in the galaxy, some king, a warlord, someone important. The dragon inclined its head. I did not want them. Jonas barked a short laugh. You didn't want them? No, the sheer certainty in that single word sent a shiver down my spine. I've spent years being used by governments, by commanders, by causes that saw me as a tool and nothing more. I had spent my life following orders, only to be thrown away when I was no longer useful. Now I'm being told that the most fearsome creature in the known galaxy, the Council's living enforcer, has chosen me not because of rank, not because of power, but because it wanted to. Jonas shook his head. I don't even know your name. The dragon hesitated. I was not given one. Jonas frowned. They never named you. The dragon paused, then said, then they called me Ghost. Jonas didn't ask why, he already knew, a white beast, a silent hunter, something that moved unseen and left nothing but ruin in its wake, a tool forged for death, but not anymore. Jonas studied the dragon for a long moment, then, after a beat, exhaled, Ghost, huh? The dragon tilted its head slightly. Does that name displease you? Jonas sighed, shaking his head. Not my place to tell you what to call yourself. Ghost, then consider this, the dragon said almost carefully, then what will you call me? Jonas let out a slow breath, his mind turning. A name meant something. It was a choice, not an order. His gaze flicked over the dragon's shimmering white scales, the pale glow of its body against the darkness like a fragment of starlight made flesh. He thought of the past, of battles lost and won, of ghosts that refused to die. Then softly he said, Vin. The dragon blinked. Jonas wasn't sure why that name had come to him, maybe it was an old soldier he had once known, or a story whispered around campfires, or maybe it was just the right name for something no longer bound by the past. Ghost? No, Vin. The dragon tilted its head again, testing the word, murmuring as if tasting it for the first time. Then, slowly, its wings shifted and something unreadable passed through its gaze. I like it. Jonas huffed a quiet laugh, glad to hear it. For a moment there was silence, then Vin spoke, its voice softer than before. So what now? Jonas glanced up at the sky, the same sky that had once been his prison, the same stars that had been sealed off from him by the council's decree. His exile had never truly been about pushing him to the edges of civilization, it had been about breaking him. And yet here he stood with something far stronger than any exile order the council could issue. Jonas rolled his shoulders, feeling a strange sort of lightness settle in his chest. Well, he said, smirking faintly, I was supposed to spend the rest of my life running. He glanced at Vin. But now I think I might want to do something a little more fun. The calm didn't last long, it never did. Jonas had barely gotten used to the fact that he was now the unlikely keeper of a dragon, a legendary killer turned rogue companion, before the first signs of trouble appeared. It started with a subtle shift in the air, the way the wind carried a scent that didn't belong. Vin noticed it before Jonas did. The massive dragon lifted its head, nostrils flaring, as its silver-blue eyes flicked toward the darkness beyond the ruined structures of Braxton III. Jonas had spent years on battlefields, and he knew the look of a creature sensing an enemy before it appeared. He didn't need to ask, he just reached for his rifle. The night pressed in around them, the mining colony's long-abandoned corridors stretching into black voids of rust and silence. Jonas moved, keeping low, his steps light against the cracked metal ground. Baron followed beside him, its enormous form oddly quiet for something its size, its body poised like a predator waiting for the moment to strike. Then, movement. Jonas barely had time to react before the first shot rang out. He dropped to the ground as a plasma bolt whizzed past his head, slamming into a rusted support beam behind him. Sparks rained down, more shots followed. Jonas swore under his breath, rolling behind the wreckage of an old cargo hauler. He didn't even have to look to know who was coming for him, the council hadn't given up, and now they weren't sending just one hunter. Jonas peeked out from cover, eyes narrowing at the three figures advancing through the ruins. Their armor was dark, sleek, the kind used by high-tier operatives who specialized in eliminating problems like him. They weren't coming to talk. Jonas adjusted his grip on his rifle, exhaling, all right then, looks like they found us, he muttered. Baron remained still, watching them approach. Any chance you're bulletproof? Jonas asked, glancing at the dragon. Baron tilted its head slightly. To an extent, it replied. Jonas sighed. Yeah, I was afraid you'd say that. The agents closed in, weapons raised in precise formation. Jonas could see it in their movements, the sharp efficiency of men who had done this 100 times before. They weren't expecting a fight, they thought he was alone. Big mistake. Jonas took a slow breath, centered himself, then fired the first shot. It hit the lead agent square in the chest, knocking him backward. The remaining two reacted instantly, returning fire, their plasma bolts turning the night into streaks of blue light. Jonas ducked behind cover, heart pounding. Then Vin moved. The dragon launched forward with blinding speed, its white form a blur against the darkness. The closest agent had no time to react before a massive tail struck him with bone-shattering force, sending him crashing through a rusted-out wall. The third agent spun toward Vin, firing wildly, a mistake. Vin let out a low, guttural sound, not a roar, not quite a growl, but something far more terrifying. Then, it vanished. Jonas blinked. 1 second the dragon had been there, the next, gone. It reappeared behind the agent, moving in a way that no living thing should have been able to move. Jonas had seen creatures phase in and out of reality before, but this was something else. Before the agent could react, Vin's jaws clamped down on his weapon, crushing it like glass. The agent froze. Jonas took the opening, one shot. The agent dropped. Silence. Jonas exhaled, lowering his rifle. His breath came in sharp bursts as adrenaline still thrummed through his veins. It was over. Vin stood over the last agent's body, its glowing eyes unreadable. The dragon was completely unscathed. Jonas ran a hand through his hair, staring at the scene. "Well," he muttered, "that answers a few questions." Baron's head tilted slightly. "Did you doubt me?" Jonas scoffed, kicking at a piece of debris. "Let's just say I don't usually put my life in the hands of something that used to hunt me." The dragon studied him for a moment, then simply said, "You are still alive." Jonas huffed a laugh. Can't argue with that. Beneath the dry humor, he knew the truth, this was just the beginning. If the council had sent these men, they would send more, and next time it wouldn't be 3. Jonas clenched his jaw. He needed a plan fast. They didn't linger. The moment the bodies turned cold, Jonas was already moving. Baron followed without question as Jonas slipped through the ruins, weaving between crumbling walls and collapsed corridors. They needed to leave before reinforcements arrived, which meant finding a ship. Jonas had one last card to play. It wasn't much, but it was better than staying here and waiting to die. He led Vin toward the far edge of the settlement, where an old docking bay lay half buried beneath layers of sand and forgotten time. The council had stripped Braxton free of anything useful years ago, but Jonas knew something they didn't. He had buried a ship here years ago when he first realized the council wanted him gone. He had hidden an old transport beneath the wreckage, wiring it with backup power and setting the systems to sleep, a fail-safe, and now it was the only chance they had. Baron padded beside him, its presence unnervingly quiet for something its size. Jonas still wasn't used to it, the way the dragon moved with perfect control, as if it had spent its entire existence waiting for a moment that had never come. Jonas glanced at it. "You don't talk much, do you, Vin?" Baron's silver-blue eyes flicked toward him. "I only speak when there is something to say," it replied. Jonas snorted. "Yeah, well, that makes one of us." They reached the buried hangar. Jonas crouched beside the rusted panel that had once served as a control console, wiping away a layer of dust and grime. The power lines were still intact. "Good," he said as he tapped a command into the keypad. A low hum filled the air, the sound of old systems waking up after years of silence. The floor trembled, then, with a deep mechanical groan, the ground beneath them split open. Jonas stepped back as a ship slowly emerged, its sleek frame rising from the underground bay. It wasn't anything special, a battered but functional long-range scout built for speed, not war. Baron watched, unreadable. Jonas exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "All right," he muttered, "this is our ticket off this rock." Baron's gaze lingered on the ship, something flickering behind its cosmic eyes, and then Jonas smirked. "Then we find out just how badly the council screwed up." He met Vin's gaze. "Because if they're scared of me now." His fingers tightened on the ship's controls. "They have no idea what's coming." Baron's tail flicked, and for the first time, the dragon grinned. The ship rumbled beneath them, its ancient thrusters sputtering to life as it rose from the underground hangar. Dust and sand billowed in thick clouds, obscuring the broken remains of Braxton 3's mining colony. Jonas gripped the controls tightly, feeling the weight of years pressing against his fingers. The ship was old, barely holding together, but it would have to be enough. Vin stood near the cockpit, his massive form coiled into the limited space with surprising ease. His silver-blue eyes flicked over the controls, scanning every switch and monitor as if he had seen this all before. Jonas didn't have time to ask how, because the Council wasn't going to give them a clean exit. The radar flickered with a dull ping, warning of movement in the upper atmosphere. Jonas tapped the console, his jaw tightening as 3 red blips appeared. "Pursuit ships, damn it," he muttered. "I should have known they wouldn't leave me alone so easily." "They're fast," he added under his breath, watching their approach vectors. Too fast. The Council had deployed interceptors, sleek warships designed for planetary takedown. They weren't coming to capture him, they were coming to erase him. Jonas's fingers flew over the controls, priming the ship's barely functional weapons. "We're not outrunning them," he said, already calculating the few bad options they had. Vin was silent for a long moment. Then, in that same calm, ancient voice he said, "I will handle them." Jonas turned, giving the dragon a skeptical glance. "Oh, yeah. With what exactly?" Harsh language. Vin didn't smile, he didn't even blink. Instead, he moved with an effortless grace that should have been impossible in such a cramped space. The dragon coiled toward the ship's exit hatch. Jonas barely had time to register what he was doing before Vin's form shimmered just for a second, then he was gone. Jonas whipped around to the viewport just in time to see a blinding white shape explode into the sky. Vin didn't need the ship, he was already moving faster than anything Jonas had ever seen, faster than the interceptors. The first ship didn't even have time to react before Vin was on it. One moment, the Council's sleek, silver fighter was cutting through the clouds, the next, a flash of white claws tore straight through its hull. The ship burst apart, debris scattering into the sky like shattered glass. Jonas barely had time to swear before Vin dived again, his massive body twisting through the atmosphere in perfect, deadly arcs. The second ship tried to veer away, but it didn't matter. Vin vanished, only to reappear behind the cockpit in an instant. One swipe of his claws, and the ship detonated in a violent burst of flame and metal. Jonas's heart hammered in his chest as he gripped the controls, guiding his own ship toward the upper atmosphere. The final interceptor was still out there, but it was already retreating. The Council's pilots weren't idiots, they had just watched their elite warships get torn apart by something that wasn't supposed to exist, and they wanted no part of it. Jonas let out a breath as he pushed the throttle forward, feeling the ship shudder beneath him. The sky shifted, turning from deep violet to endless black as they broke free of the planet's gravity. A second later, Vin was back, the dragon appeared on the outer hull, his wings spread wide against the void, his body glowing faintly against the stars. Then, without a sound, he slipped back through the ship's airlock, stepping into the cockpit as if nothing had happened. Jonas turned to him, still gripping the flight controls, breathing hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. Vin merely tilted his head. "They will send more," he said. Jonas let out a breathless, humorless laugh. "Yeah," he muttered, shaking his head, "no kidding." But something inside him had shifted. For the first time since this whole damn chase had started, since the Council had declared him an enemy, since he had been hunted across the stars, he wasn't the one running anymore. They didn't jump straight into hyperspace. Jonas needed time to think, to breathe, to process what the hell had just happened. He guided the ship toward the outer edges of the Braxton system, weaving through asteroid fields and drifting wreckage, keeping them hidden while he got his head straight. Vin sat curled in the cargo hold, his massive wings tucked neatly against his back, his silver-blue eyes closed as if he were resting. Jonas wasn't sure if dragons even needed sleep, hell, he wasn't even sure if Vin was alive the way other creatures were, the way he moved, the way he vanished and reappeared, or the sheer power he displayed. It wasn't natural. No wonder the Council had tried to control him. Jonas leaned against the control panel, running a hand through his hair. "All right," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder, "time to start getting some damn answers." Vin's eyes flickered open. Jonas didn't waste time. "That thing you did, disappearing like that, is not something I've ever seen before." Vin blinked slowly and deliberately. "It is a part of me," he said. Jonas narrowed his eyes. "Care to elaborate?" The dragon was silent for a long moment, then in that same calm, steady voice said, "I was made to be a weapon." Jonas had figured as much, but hearing it out loud made his stomach twist. "I was forged in the Council's laboratories," Vin continued, his voice low, "bound to their will, a creature without thought, without choice," his gaze meeting Jonas's until he said, "Until I saw you." Jonas frowned. "And what?" "That broke their control." Baron studied him for a moment, then slowly nodded. Jonas exhaled, shaking his head. "That doesn't make sense." The dragon tilted its head slightly. "No, it does not." Jonas didn't like that answer. It meant something was missing, a piece of the puzzle he hadn't found yet. But before he could push further, the ship's call crackled to life. Jonas turned sharply, tapping the console. A message flickered onto the screen, short, encrypted, but unmistakably urgent. It was a council transmission. They weren't backing down. Jonas skimmed the message, his fingers tightening around the edge of the control panel. "They put a bounty on us," he muttered. Vin didn't react. Jonas let out a dry chuckle. 50 million credits, he leaned back, exhaling. "I think that makes us the most wanted men in the galaxy." Silence stretched between them, then, after a long pause, Vin smiled. Jonas blinked. Are you actually enjoying this?" The dragon's silver-blue eyes gleamed. "It has been a long time since I have had a purpose," Vin replied. Jonas stared at him, then, despite himself, grinned. "Well," he muttered, flipping a switch and engaging the hyperdrive, "let's give them their money's worth." As the stars stretched into infinity, the hunt was no longer theirs to endure, it was theirs to control. The darkness of space stretched infinitely beyond the viewport, the streaks of hyperspace flickering past like shattered fragments of light. The ship thrummed beneath Jonas's hands as he adjusted their course, his mind already running through the implications of the bounty that had just been placed on them, 50 million credits, enough to turn every mercenary, bounty hunter, and desperate drifter into their enemy. The council wasn't just trying to eliminate him anymore, they were making a statement. It wasn't just about Jonas, it was about Vin. They had lost control of their greatest weapon, and now, instead of hiding that mistake, they were turning the entire galaxy against them. No one would ask questions, no one would hesitate. Jonas ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "They're scared." Vin stood near the back of the cockpit, his silver-blue eyes watching Jonas in that unnervingly silent way of his. He had been still for a long time, curled in the cargo hold, deep in thought. Now, he finally spoke, "They should be." Jonas let out a dry chuckle. "Well, that makes one of us, because right now, we've got a fleet's worth of bounty hunters looking to collect." He turned his chair slightly to face the dragon. "And I'm guessing you don't want to spend the rest of your life dodging assassins." Vin's gaze didn't waver. "No." Jonas strummed his fingers against the control panel, weighing their options. They couldn't keep running, that much was obvious. He had spent most of his life trying to outrun the people who wanted him gone, and it had never worked. But this time, he wasn't alone. Vin wasn't just a fugitive, he wasn't just another target, he was the council's nightmare made real. Jonas leaned forward, tapping a few controls on the navigation panel. "If we're going to end this," he muttered, "we have to stop fighting like prey." Vin tilted his head slightly. "You intend to strike first?" Jonas smirked. "Damn right I do." For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one being hunted, now he was the hunter. The council's fleet floated in perfect formation above the gas giant VTO-7, their sleek warships glinting against the storm-ridden backdrop. They had stationed themselves there for one reason, to wait. Jonas knew their kind, he knew how they operated. They didn't expect him to fight back, they thought he would run, that the bounty would force him into hiding, that he would slip between the cracks until someone collected his head. They didn't understand, this wasn't his fight anymore, this was Vin's. Jonas sat in the pilot's chair, watching the Council's warships drift in the distance. He could feel the tension in the air, the moment before impact, the weight of inevitability pressing against his ribs. Then Vin moved. Jonas barely had time to blink before the dragon launched himself from the ship, his white scales shimmering in the void. One moment, he was beside Jonas, the next, he was gone. Jonas gripped the controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory as he watched Vin streak toward the warships like a falling star. The Council didn't even have time to react. The first ship never saw it coming. Vin tore through its hull like paper, his massive body phasing in and out of existence, weaving through the metal as if it were nothing more than mist. The explosion erupted silently in the vacuum of space, debris scattering outward. Then the other ship scrambled its weapons, energy turrets locking onto Vin's blinding form, but it didn't matter. Vin was too fast, he vanished only to reappear inside the second warship, his claws tearing through the bridge before the crew even had time to scream. Jonas took the opportunity. He pushed the throttle forward, sending the ship into a spiraling descent as it weaved through the firestorm of battle. His fingers flew over the controls, targeting the fleet's command vessel, the one ship that mattered. One missile was all it took. The explosion rippled outward, the flagship's engines ruptured in a burst of blue fire. The fleet broke apart, confusion rippling through their ranks as their leader vanished into the void. Jonas grinned. Looks like they weren't ready for us. Vin reappeared, his massive form emerging from the wreckage, his silver-blue eyes burning with something deep and unrelenting. He landed on Jonas's ship, wings spread, body coiled as if waiting for the next command, but Jonas knew he didn't need to give one. Vin had already decided he was done running, and so was Jonas. The remaining ships hesitated, they could chase, they could fight, but they wouldn't win, they knew it now. Jonas exhaled, sitting back in his chair as he angled the ship toward the nearest jump point. He glanced up at Vin, still perched on the hull, the dragon's breath visible in the cold of space. So, what do we do now? Vin's lips curled into something dangerously close to a smirk. Whatever we want, he replied. Jonas grinned as the stars stretched before them, endless and open, and, for the first time in his life, he felt truly free.